Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Jack Hagel. The election is 8 months away, and North Carolina is already shaping up to be a close one. That's according to a new WRAL news poll released Monday. The poll showed a number of key races and statistical ties. It also forecasted trouble for President Joe Biden. WRAL state government reporter Will Doran has been digging into the numbers, and he joins us now. Will, good to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
Lots of close races here. I want to look at the presidential election. North Carolina's a purple state, but our latest poll shows that Donald Trump could have an edge.
Yes, and I don't think that's too surprising for people. Obviously, Trump won North Carolina in 2016 and again in 2020, but Joe Biden made it pretty close in 2020, and this new poll shows a much bigger lead for Trump than I think a lot of people would have expected. He's up 50 to 45 with 5% of people undecided. But he hasn't gotten 50% yet in the two elections he has won here. He won both times with around 49% of the vote, due to third-party candidates and things like that. So to be up, already at 50% with, still some people undecided is pretty notable and, could spell trouble for Democratic President Joe Biden and his reelection efforts.
So what's helping Trump and what's hurting Biden?
Well, there's a few things going on here. There's obviously Biden's age is a huge factor that plenty of people are talking about when they talk about the president. And I will say, he got a lot of credit for the State of the Union speech that he gave recently and, coming out, looking strong and energetic in that speech. And a lot of this poll, not 100% of it, but much of it was conducted actually before that speech. So it could be that, if people's minds were changed by that speech, it's not necessarily reflected here. But we see Trump, at least in these numbers, doing really well with younger voters. And I think that's not really the assumption that a lot of people who pay attention to politics have. Usually you think of politics, you think, okay, older people more conservative, younger people more liberal. But this actually showed that Trump and Biden were tied among voters 50 and up, and that Trump had a double-digit lead among voters who were under 50. So, typically as you age, you become more likely to vote. So there's a silver lining, I suppose, for the Democrats in there. But yeah, that was a pretty shocking finding, I think.
Does that say more about Trump's campaigning, or does it say more about the job that Biden has done while in office?
Well, both. And, to the point about Trump's campaigning, he's been campaigning for years. He's started campaigning in 2019 for the 2020 elections, and then basically hasn't stopped. It's been 4 or 5 years straight of him campaigning. Biden, meanwhile, won the 2020 election, had to quit campaigning so that he could go and be president and do all the work that entails. So he's expected to ramp up his campaign in the coming months here, and, particularly in North Carolina. And I spoke with Ken Alper, who's the president of Survey USA, who did this poll for us. And he said that, yeah, definitely expect these results to kind of tighten up the race to get closer as the Biden campaign starts hitting the airwaves with their ads. And, it's going to be massive, massive ads here in North Carolina. If your TV isn't already inundated, just get ready for it, because it's going to be all over the place.
What's interesting to me is that most of the people who are voting in this election, 55%, according to this latest poll, wish they had different choices for president. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think that is again another thing that spells problem for Democrats, because, typically, when we talk about elections, we talk about, Democrats have the best chance when there's higher turnout, and, when they can convince people who are, not the type of people who vote in every single election that, this is the year that you need to come out. And if you look at these results, 55% of people, including, I should note, 71% of independent, unaffiliated voters say that they're not happy with these choices, that they want different names on the ballot. That does not spell high turnout to me. That spells a lot of people staying at home, not getting motivated to come out and cast a vote for either Trump or Biden, who, they might dislike for different reasons.
Well, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll hear about another close contest. That's the race for North Carolina governor. Stick around. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. We're talking with WRAL state government reporter Will Doran about the November elections and results from the new WRAL news poll. Will, an even closer race that we're watching is the governor's race. Who's running, and what did the WRAL news poll tell us?
Yeah, so this race is going to pit the two main candidates, our Republican Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson and Democratic Attorney General Josh Stein. There will also be some third-party candidates on the ballot, but those are the two main ones. Those are who this poll looked at, and it found that Stein, even though, like we were just saying, even though Trump has a pretty commanding lead over Biden, Stein, the Democrat in the governor's race, is actually leading Robinson, the Republican. So he's running 6-7 points ahead of Joe Biden in the state. So I think that is something that Democrats can be pretty happy about, even though it's not a huge race. He's about 2 points up, this poll found. But, if he's leading by 2, even when Biden's down 5, that's a pretty strong showing. And that's exactly how Democratic Governor Roy Cooper has been elected governor the last 2 times. He's managed to win North Carolina, even as the states voted for Trump for president as well.
Now, Stein and Robinson each won statewide elections in 2020, Stein for attorney general and Robinson for lieutenant governor. So it's likely that some North Carolina voters voted for both men in 2020. That's got to make this race hard to predict, right?
Yes, absolutely. And compared to the presidential race, there are a lot more undecided voters for governor. I think because of that, you have people who either, one, haven't been paying as much attention to this race as they have for president, or 2, maybe they're like, hey, wait, I voted for both these guys last time. Now I got to pick. And so, what we do there when we're trying to predict is, we say, okay, we kind of assume that Republicans are going to usually vote for the Republicans. Democrats are usually going to vote for the Democrats. So what do the unaffiliated voters do? And, here in North Carolina, there's actually more unaffiliated voters than there are Democrats or Republicans. So they're a pretty big block. And within those voters, and specifically among people who self-identify as moderate, kind of the true swing voters, Josh Stein is up by a 2-1 margin over Mark Robinson among those moderate voters. And so I think that's something that, the Stein campaign can look at and say, hey, this is looking pretty good for us, even though, there are still lots of undecided voters out there. The folks who are in the middle who have made up their minds are mostly siding with Stein. Now,
if Stein is able to win moderate and unaffiliated voters, could that help Biden?
Yes. So one of the experts I spoke with for these stories referred to the reverse coattails effect. And, lots of times you hear about, statewide candidates kind of riding the coattails of the presidential candidates. And, okay, even if your candidate for president doesn't win, maybe they help, get out more votes for, candidates running for the state legislature or something like that. They said this year it could be a reverse coattail situation where, because people are so dissatisfied with their choices for president, they don't really feel that energized to come vote for either Trump or Biden, then this governor's race could actually influence how the presidential race goes, kind of the opposite of what you would normally expect, because, this is going to be a really high-profile race. Both these candidates are, very polarizing to the other side. They're both going to spend a ton of money on ads. And, if you see that, moderate voters are pretty heavily siding with Stein in this race, it could be that there's some people who then decide, okay, well, I'll vote Democrat for president too. And even if I don't love Joe Biden or, think that someone else should be nominated, well, I like Stein, so I'll vote for Biden too. So that's kind of the feeling that, if Biden's going to have a shot here, it could actually be that, Josh Stein or other Democratic candidates down the ballot who are a little more exciting to voters are what lifts up that presidential ticket.
Now, the race to replace Stein as AG, that's almost as close as the race for governor. What did the poll tell us?
Yes, so the poll says that it is pretty much a dead heat between Jeff Jackson, who's the Democratic nominee, and Dan Bishop, the Republican nominee. And this is a race that I think needs to get a lot of attention moving forward, because going back to the 1960s, every single North Carolinian who's been elected attorney general has later run for either governor or U.S. Senate. So in all likelihood, we are kind of setting up somebody to one day run for higher office here with this attorney general's race. And both of these men, both Jackson and Bishop, are currently U.S. congressmen, have big national followings, and it's going to be just a huge, nasty, competitive race. And this poll found basically a dead heat. I think it was that Jackson was ahead by 1 point, but with so many undecided voters, it's still anybody's game here. And so that is going to be a really close one to watch, and will probably go about the same as the governor's race. That's how the last few elections have gone. Roy Cooper has, won the governorship even as Trump has won the presidency. And then, Josh Stein won the AG's race, but by an even thinner margin than Cooper won for governor. So I think whatever happens, it's going to be close, just like this polling is showing us. And it's a really important race that people need to be paying attention to.
And there's another really close race that people are watching. It's the race for state superintendent. Our episode yesterday was focused on that race. The WRAL News poll gave us some new insight. What did we find out?
Yes. Well, this is basically the same as the race for attorney general. It's tons of undecided voters. Around, I think, 1 in 5 voters say that they still haven't made up their minds on who they're going to vote for who should lead the public schools here. And of the people who have made up their minds, it's, again, basically a dead tie. Michelle Morrow, the Republican, is up by 1% over Democrat Mo Green. And they are two very different candidates. For people who missed that episode that you just talked about, I definitely recommend going back and listening to that for more detail on this race. But that's another race, I think, with so many undecided candidates still, both sides really have an opportunity to not only define their own candidate, but to define the other side's candidate and, really make an argument to voters. And, as people often mention, a lot of voters will vote against someone as much as they're going to vote for someone. So I think you could see a lot of that sort of messaging in lots of these races. It's probably going to be pretty negative this year. Voters who want to hear happy things about candidates might have to go searching that out.
Are you surprised to see that race so close?
I think both of those candidates are almost completely unknown statewide. With Jeff Jackson and Dan Bishop, here at least you have two people who are, they're currently representing North Carolina in Congress. They've got big social media followings. They've run plenty of elections before. With Michelle Morrow and Mo Green, these are both kind of people who have come up from like local political scenes and haven't really ever run a big race like this before. So I think probably what these numbers are showing is more just kind of a reflection of, 40% of people are going to vote Republican no matter what. 40% of people are going to vote Democratic no matter what. And then it's that final 20% that you have to really reach if you want to win a statewide race here in North Carolina.
What do you expect the candidates to do in the coming months to try to win over those undecided voters?
I think it's a lot. I think it's a lot of just traveling the state, shaking hands at local Rotary clubs, at churches, at barbecue spots, just kind of old-fashioned retail politics. And I think it's also just being able to raise a lot of money. The presidential race and the governor's race are going to really dominate the airwaves. But, if these candidates in these kind of smaller races are able to get in, at least a few ads, even though it's going to be really expensive, that can help them, reach some voters who haven't made up their mind. And, if you can find a good, catchy ad that's about your candidate, or if it's against the other side, whichever you think is the best bet, that's how people get swayed. And, it's a lot of these seats are truly up for grabs here. And, it's not just these ones we're talking about. These are obviously some of the biggest ones, but our Council of State, which is the 10 executive branch seats that kind of run state government, most of those are going to turn over. And so, voters have a lot to study up on between now and November.
Going to be a very interesting and busy 8 months. Thanks, Will.
Thank you.
That's WRAL State Government reporter Will Doran. For full coverage of the WRAL News Poll, go to the NC Capital section of WRAL.com. And we'll be releasing results throughout the week, so be sure to check back. I'm Jack Hagel. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.